Hi, this is Ben Quiggle with another edition of Woodall's Outdoor Hospitality Update, and I'm editor of Woodall's Campground magazine. My co-host, of course, is the esteemed Mike Gast, former vice president of communications at Campgrounds of America, and writer for RV Travel. I guess, are you the senior writer at RV Travel, Mike, or are you?
Oh, I can claim whatever I want, but yeah, that's the tag that Chuck's put on me for the last few weeks anyway. It usually happens when you write something controversial, then he wants to put senior on you, so they
Yeah,
leave you alone.
yep, pretty much. That's how it goes in the newspaper industry. And with us are Jeff Crider and Rick Kessler. I guess I'll just start with Rick. If you just want to kind of introduce, well, I already introduced your name, so just kind of how you got into the field and what you do, I guess.
Okay. I'm the executive editor at RV Business, which is the sister magazine to Woodall's Campground magazine. It'll be 8 years this summer, and
Yeah.
I've enjoyed every minute of it. Prior to that, I was in newspapers for 25 years or so in the Metro Detroit market. And even prior to that, or prior to my time with RV Business and Woodall's, I also, and currently still am an RVer. I come from a very large family of RVers. My grandparents are the ones that started back in the olden days. I think they actually have, believe it or not, had a 4-digit FMCA number. I don't
Okay.
know.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
they went all the way from Alaska to the Panama Canal and back. And gosh, now I guess I have maybe half a dozen aunts and uncles and cousins and whatnot. And we enjoy the lifestyle. We just were camping last weekend, actually.
And you worked on a blog too, right? You had your own like blog.
I did for a while. It was called Great Lakes Camper. I've let that lapse. It's too much work for one little guy here well, I guess I'm not so little, but for one person to keep track of.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And if you've ever been to an FMCA convention, the lower number you are, the people, oh, I can't believe you're that low of a number because the number stays with you permanently, right?
It does. And matter of fact, they have started up, well, it's not recent anyway, but I think it's called a legacy program where your children can basically inherit your number. My mom has their number as one of their daughters, and I've got an aunt and uncle who has the number as one of their sons.
That's just interesting. Very interesting. Jeff, if you just want to kind of introduce yourself, you're pretty well known in the outdoor hospitality industry.
Yeah, it's a product of my longevity. Yeah, I had been a newspaper reporter for about 12 years almost before going into PR work and whatnot. And my last newspaper job, I covered the RV industry for the Press Enterprise in Riverside County, California. And very soon after writing my first story or two on recreational vehicles, I was contacted by John Soloway at what was then the Affinity Group in Ventura, California, asking me if I would kindly rewrite a story that I had done for the Press Enterprise so that they could use it in RV Business Magazine. So I thought, that sounds cool. And my editor had actually told me that there would be freelance opportunities in the RV industry for my writing. So he had no problem with that. And then very soon after that, I got contacted by Sherman Goldenberg. And this was right before my daughter was born. And I had told Sherman that I was, fairly skilled photographer. And I was pitching myself, for him to use me as a photographer for RV Business Magazine. And so he sent me out to cover some RV show in Southern California, which I diligently went to, took my Rolleiflex with me that my grandfather had given me. I mean, I was all set up. Anyway, for whatever reason, none of the pictures turned out. I don't know what happened. I can't remember. I was telling somebody this story the other day. So I had to call a very skeptical Sherman Goldenberg and tell him that, look, I really am a photographer. I think I sent him even some print pictures because this was before the digital age. And he gave me another chance. And lo and behold, I've been working for him in some capacity ever since. And my daughter just turned 27. So that's how long I've been working for Sherman Goldenberg and the RV industry. And I grew up camping and RVing. So the best memories that I have growing up are of the trips I took with my parents and my cousins and friends going and exploring, the national parks and other scenic places in the West. So I needed no selling in terms of, trying to market the lifestyle, because it was just something that was my best memory overall growing up. And so this is really my fun work, and I enjoy doing it. And I was thinking the other day during the pandemic, we were all isolated from each other for so long. And really, there are some people that I see more often in trade shows in the campground business than I see of my own family members, who I only see at Christmas and Thanksgiving or whatever. Yeah. So, a lot of the people in the industry get to be kind of like extended family just simply because I see them more than I see a lot of my own family members.
Yeah. So guys, we've got, this is kind of what the newspaper industry used to look like when you look at our four faces.
Yeah.
And right now we probably, four of us would probably be the current staff of a major metro daily, because that's what's happened to the newspaper business. Why do you think the skill set that we got within the newspaper business translated so well and over to the RV industry?
Because we don't mind working for little pay.
Well, that's always a big part of it.
Well,
so, Jeff, what was your transition like, Jeff? Was it really difficult to make that jump from newspapers into something like an RV?
No, it really wasn't, because while I did investigative reporting at the Press Enterprise and really all the newspapers that I worked at, I loved to do investigative reporting. And I was a newspaper reporter back in the days when newspapers had teeth all over the place. And I loved doing investigative work. And actually one of the county officials, that I used to work with used to joke with me, the worst thing that could happen to you in a day would be to get a call from me, working on an investigative story. And that was me, 30 years ago. And I love doing that kind of work. But the reality is the majority of the business writing that I did at the Press Enterprise, and really even before that at the Desert Sun, was positive business coverage. It was news about companies expanding, new hotels coming into town. I covered the travel and tourism business at the last two newspapers I worked at. And so a lot of those stories were generally very positive, although I did a lot of economic report stories on whatever the latest numbers were that came out of Washington, D.C., or whatever the consumer price index was doing. I was always doing those kinds of calls. But the majority of the reports were positive. And so I began to realize later on that there's not a very big step from writing positive stories for a newspaper to writing a story for a trade magazine like RV Business Magazine. It's the same skill set. And in the early days, Sherman had me do a lot of investigative reporting for RV Business, but it wasn't investigative in terms of looking for dirt. It was investigative in terms of finding out what's happening with a new trend. And I started right around the time that slide outs were being introduced in the motorhome. That was a big thing. And I covered Fleetwood and National RV and Thor, California, heavily. I mean, I was involved in covering, all of their annual reports, their quarterly reports, anything that they were doing, dealers. And so the same business reporting skill sets that I developed as a newspaper reporter were an easy fit for the RV business. The nice thing about writing about the RV business was that it was an industry that I enjoyed. And so it was fun for me to write about what the industry was doing. And then later on, the Affinity Group acquired Woodall's Campground Management at that time. And then Sherman moved me over from RV Business to the Campground newspaper. And then I started interviewing campground operators. And then they were really the ones, and I tell campground operators this every time I give a talk somewhere around the country, that they're the ones who educated me on running a campground. And I joke with them that the reason I don't have a campground myself is because they've scared the hell out of me over the years.
Exactly.
But I enjoy,
So,
writing about the nuances of the campground business. And I feel that it's an industry that I really identify with, and I could see myself running a campground. I don't go too far with that thought, but I could see myself doing it. I know how tired I would be at the end of the day, and I like using my writing to help people in the industry.
so Rick, you've been in your chair for a while now. What's the big change you've seen in the last? I know it's been changing super rapidly in the last couple of years, but what's the big change since you started, as far as the campground business goes?
Oh, no doubt, availability. It's tough to get a site now. We're fortunate. We have 8 trips. We're just weekend campers for the most part. And we have 8 trips on the books for this season, which is more than we've ever had. Maybe because the kids have all moved out now, it's easier. I don't know.
But, you have that new rig too.
But we have a new rig. Yep.
You have
pretty happy
rig.
about that. But the only reason we have 8 trips on the books is because 6 months to the day we reserve them. And it's just tough. It's just tough. I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't already know, but for me, that's the biggest difference. And, it's great. More people love the camping lifestyle. That's terrific. The campsite inventory needs to increase, and that's not something that's done quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the big challenges the industry faces. And I know that the campground owners are expanding. I think we have and new developments. I think just today on our website, we have 4 to 5 stories about new developments and expansions. So, I mean, it's happening. It's just not happening quick enough. Everyone decided to go camping at the same time. And I guess it's a little rough on that end. I know, I guess, Rick, what got you into writing that blog that you wrote? What got you into writing the camp?
Well, the blog, again, it was Great Lakes Camper. And I started that blog back when I was still at the Oakland Press newspaper, which is in Pontiac, Michigan. And that was because our publisher at the time said, we need to get on with this internet thing. So everybody do something.
Like, God, we sound old.
That's about it. So I said, well, I've heard of this thing called a blog, and I'm a camper, so I'll write about camping. And that was how that started. And Jeff, it's my story is similar to yours because the newspaper staff, everybody knew that I was an RVer. So when Sherman Goldenberg called my newspaper to find somebody to write on the Detroit RV show that particular year, the staff knew enough to send him my way. So Sherman hired me as a freelance basis, and I stayed in touch with him. And then when a position opened up, he gave me a call, and I was ready to jump ship. And I guess the rest is history, as the cliche goes.
I know you follow a lot of other bloggers around, and it's just been amazing, the explosion. Like you see like the popular ones, and then underneath maybe the top tier bloggers, there's just hundreds. I mean, I don't know where all the content goes. It's just amazing.
You can't keep up with it. I try to, but it's just too many.
Let's talk about that for a second, Rick and Jeff, because it seems like everybody's an expert now, and anybody can write about RVing, and everybody that wants to take a trip in their RV all of a sudden has a blog and becomes an authority. And there's a lot of bad information going on out there, just not just about what you're going to see when you get there, but maintenance, how to buy, just about every stretch of that is how do we differentiate the real in-depth stuff? And Jeff does great stories for campground owners. There's depth there. There's something to be had. And when you go online and you start looking and just searching, there's so many things that get thrown out there. They're either bad information, old information, or just skim the top. And are people satisfied with that? Or is that the new trend, that we're just going to barely skim the news? Is there still a spot, Jeff, for in-depth reporting about this industry?
I think so long as Woodall's is around, there will be. I mean, I think it makes us more of a source, a credible source for the industry, and you can see it in the writing, you can see it in the depth of reporting. Because the other thing that you get when you have reporters, that are my age, that are your age, Rick's age, is that people have confidence talking to us. It's not the same as when we were 25 and people would hold back a little bit because they weren't sure if we were going to understand them completely or if they could trust us. But as I was mentioning earlier, I've been working with this industry now for almost 30 years, been going to the trade shows that long, almost. And so there's people there that will talk to me and they'll share things with me that, they don't want me to write about, but they'll tell me things to help make me smarter and then have me kind of figure out what should I do to try to help the industry more on certain issues. And, so it makes you better as a reporter and a writer, and it puts you in a better position to help the industry because you can write more useful stories rather than just rants on different things. I think that's really what we're trying to do at Woodall's, is write stories that new owners can use in particular. And this is something that I've realized the last few years more and more. There's still new people coming into the industry. And oftentimes people come into the campground industry in mid-career or late career from some other profession. And so they're on a fast learning curve. So they want to come to a convention and learn as much as they possibly can, read as much as they possibly can. So they actually like articles that are packed with how-to information, even though some of it may seem kind of basic to us because we've been in the industry so long. But somebody who just bought a park last year with an investor group, they need to know that. They need to know, that you've got to have somebody design your park who knows where to put the pedestals. So you don't have the pedestals on the wrong position, or wrong location. There's all these kinds of issues. And I've had situations happen in interviews over the years where even I remember a park owner in Tennessee bought a park, and whoever put in the sites didn't pour the concrete thick enough. And so when the big 40-foot rigs came in, guess what happened to the concrete? And that was a big mess that all had to be dug up and redone. And so I think it's these kinds of words to the wise that are really valuable. And we have to keep repeating a lot of this information in our stories. So, and this is something that's kind of interesting to me, because I kind of wondered, how long am I going to survive writing about campgrounds? What is there to write about after you've written 10 really great stories? Okay, I'm done. What else could I possibly do? But the thing is that there's always new people coming into the campground arena, and they need to know. And maybe they didn't see those earlier stories, and maybe there's some other new advice that somebody can offer that goes beyond what I wrote about the last time. And so I get smarter in time. I can write better now than I did 10 years ago, because the campground owners that we communicate with educate us more. And we learn from their heartaches, just as we did in the Camp Cal Now summit a few days ago, when they were talking about EVs and the challenge that poses for campgrounds across the country and RV parks, and how are they going to wire these parks? How, who's going to do it? How are they going to manage those electrical loads? I mean, there's stories that are coming up like this all the time, and then that forces us to revisit these topics.
Yeah, and I think that is a good point. I think there's like when I first started at Woodall's, I was like, boy, I'm going to run out of stuff to write, like what you mentioned, Jeff. And it's always interesting because, I'll write stories about different topics, and then I'll go to conventions or conferences, or I'll talk to other owners, and there's always a different angle to talk about, or there's new things popping up. Like 5 years ago, who would have thought we'd be writing this much about electric vehicles? And it's just amazing how much I've been writing about electric vehicles, and how much we've been keeping up on that trend. And so new trends show up all the time. So it's never really dull to write about the outdoor hospitality industry.
Even some of these topics in conferences we hear about are, guide dogs versus therapy dogs, and what the regulations are. And, we hear stories about people trying to just get a cabin and using the dog, and the dog, properly, certified or whatever, properly trained. But yet some of these are really tricky stories to write about, because you have to make sure you know what you're talking about when you're giving advice to the whole country, basically, on some of these topics. Yep. So it's consequential news, even though we're writing for a niche of the business industry in the United States. Some of the things that we write about are very consequential, and we have to be careful with what we're saying.
Yeah. It's just amazing how many different trends there are in the industry. And even like Rick, I imagine, in the RV and in the RV industry too, just all the trends and all of the data and stuff that we have to keep up on. Just the amount of data right now is incredible. So many studies. So it's just incredible.
So Ben, maybe you want to put that question from Joe Moore up on the screen.
So it's Joe Moore.
Again, Joe's asking about the long-term effects of the pandemic, and he's asking Rick, but we can all answer because Rick probably has to step away and change his shirt again or something. Obviously, the industry is being inundated with new campers. Joe's asking, how long do we think this is going to last, and when do we get back to some sense of normalcy? Is there any normalcy left in the camping business?
Rick, we can start with you. Is there any normalcy left? What about the RV industry? I mean, when do they get back to normal too?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And get back to normal, I don't think there is a get back to normal. I think each day is a new normal. And again, let me first apologize for the slow internet connection.
That's okay. We've all dealt with that.
Ben's well aware of our office internet connection. The new normal. I mean, that's such a cliche. What is the new normal? The new normal is there's a lot of people who bought campers and they're going to want to use them. There's a lot of campground owners who want to provide the opportunity for those people to camp at their parks. It's going to work itself out, but until then, we're kind of up against it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the questions when I was at the Camp Cal Now conference last week in California, one of the things that some people were talking about is just the quality of the RVs and whether people will stick with it. But it seems like people are sticking with it. We're already 2 years in to this kind of surge, I guess, and it looks like people are sticking with it. Does that become an issue? I guess, Rick, does that?
People are sticking with it. I mean, just yesterday we had the retail sales for February come out, and it's the second best February ever. So you can argue that retail sales are slowing down, and yes, year over year they are slowing down, but 2021 was such an above and beyond record year that it's almost unfair to compare anything to that 2021 year. I know the dealership advisor groups are saying, don't compare your year to 2021, compare it to 2019 prior to the pandemic, which was a good year.
Yeah.
When we ask people what this year is going to be like, everyone says this will be no worse than the third best year ever. And that's on retail sales as well as OEM production levels. So no less than the third best year ever. That's why I say we're going to be up against it if you're talking about campsite availability versus the demand for those sites.
Especially if you're near a popular destination. I mean, the campsites just go so quick. It's just amazing. And the shipment levels on RVs is still up, I believe, even over last year. So that's, the shipment levels from the OEMs are still looking pretty good. I guess, Jeff, what's your thoughts on, are we just gonna stay busy forever?
Well, we know from our history that good things don't last forever.
Yeah.
So I think eventually we'll start to see a little bit of a slowdown, but I don't know when that will really manifest itself. But I think that from what I'm hearing from campground owners across the country, everybody is anticipating being as busy as they've ever been.
Yeah.
And I would think also that even if there is, or maybe I should say if and when, a slowdown in RV shipments occurs, that will give the campground industry a little more time to keep adding more sites and capacity, because ultimately at the end of the day, the industry needs to ensure that it provides people with a great experience. The RVs need to work, and people need to have a good experience at a campground. And there's like this whole ecosystem involving the different players in this economy. And so I think that, looking forward, if you were to look forward to the time when RV shipments start to decline a little bit, you're still going to see campground operators doing everything they can to expand, because there's all of these vehicles that have been pumped into the economy over the past few years, and they still need a place to go. There's a lot more people looking for places to take their kids. There's a lot more people, homeschooling their kids. I've interviewed people who have told me that they see this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to show their kids the country. And so there's been all these people taking advantage of the pandemic, for personal reasons, to try to enjoy the great outdoors and whatnot. So I think,
Jeff, you and I know, we all know a lot of campground owners, and almost weekly I'm losing friends in the industry who sell their campgrounds. Is this the golden age of selling your campground? And are we going to see this massive turnover of ownership? Is there still room for mom and pops in the business?
What I've been asking a few people in the industry about that. What I'm hearing is there still is room for mom and pops, but the price that they have to pay to get into the campground business is higher than it was before. And the other thing, I think there's several things happening here at the same time. There's a lot of people that I've known for almost the past 30 years that are selling their parks now.
Yeah.
But that's more of a function of them being close to retirement age and wanting to try something different. And then the other thing is you've got that happening, and then you've got, this period of record RV sales, which then translates into record demand for campsites, which then pushes up the value of campsites across the country, which makes it a great time to sell if you have a park that you would like to sell. And so people are taking advantage of that. I think that there's a lot of people that developed parks in the 70s and 80s that are selling right now. And
well, it used to be pretty easy to determine your value, 10 times gross or 10 times net, and that was what you were out there on the market for. But now it seems like the big prize is campgrounds, even small campgrounds with available land adjacent, and where a bigger company with more resources or a group of investors can come in and really expand rapidly. And I'm seeing a lot of that too.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. Those properties that have land for expansion that the mom and pop were never able to really build on because they didn't have the resources. Now there's big companies that will come in and acquire that property and add more sites. But, as we all know, across the country, well, in many jurisdictions across the country, they don't approve new campgrounds as quickly as the industry would like. There's some places like Santa Clara County, California, where they've made it more difficult for campgrounds and RV parks to expand. And there's another jurisdiction in Wisconsin that I wrote about recently, Bass Lake, Wisconsin, where the town fathers imposed an ordinance requiring a $250 a year fee on every campsite. And that was something that the Wisconsin Association of Campground Owners is, planning to fight. And so even though we've got this surge in demand for campsites and campgrounds, we've got backward thinking on the part of city councils and county boards of supervisors in terms of what an RV park or campground is. And they have oftentimes no concept of the economic value that a campground brings in a local economy. And just with the referrals, if you consider a 200 site campground, and if you're able to cross market local restaurants, pet groomers, things like that, you're providing all kinds of revenue to those businesses, and they're coming from your campground. But a lot of the city and county leaders don't know or are not familiar with the economics behind these parks, and that is a battle that the industry continues to fight.
So I guess, some of this, RV site shortage too has led to kind of expanding into other. So midweeks are doing better at campgrounds, which is great. We also heard about a surge in winter camping. Rick, I don't know if you'll take your new Grand Design rig out winter camping this next winter, but just a thought that, so it's just amazing. Joe Moore asked another question. Are there any areas in the country that are overstocked with RV sites? So, is there the potential to where like they're expanding so rapidly? What if there is a decrease in the market, I guess? Are they overstocked for if camping numbers start to go down?
On RVtravel.com, we hear all the time from RVers just when we talk about shortages on RV dealerships. They say they drive by the highway all the time, and the RV dealerships are overflowing and full.
Yep.
How do you equate that when we've got Thor saying they've got $18.4 billion of backlog, and Winnebago's approaching $5 billion? So where are these RVs going to go if all these lots are full? What are you hearing, Rick?
My personal opinion are those backlogs are really nice, and they're really nice on paper. We are hearing of a lot of the dealer groups are canceling those backlogged orders. We are hearing that OEMs are adjusting their production because of that. Mm-hmm. But when you drive around Elkhart, you see nothing but shipping yards full of RVs, mostly travel trailers and fifth wheels, ready to be sent out. Motorized is a whole nother topic. They can't get chassis, so they're not able to make those. So that inventory is still low if you are driving around the dealer lots.
Something that might be interesting to look at is the delivery companies, because they've been pretty hammered too, as far as having to drive these rigs all across the country. They're not like cars where you can fit 10 on a trailer and haul them away, I guess.
This is true. And then, as a quick aside, you hear Walmart, the starting pay for a truck driver for Walmart is $95,000 to $110,000 a year.
Yeah. Yep.
And these delivery drivers are working on these delivery drivers are working under contract, so they're doing so much a mile typically, and sometimes they're forced to come back empty. So their cost per mile is probably not keeping up with the cost of fuel, and so there's a lot of those guys parking, and it just doesn't make any sense for them to do anymore. So I'm sure that doesn't help the backlog you see sitting on those lots around Elkhart.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess, getting close to the end of this show, I guess I did want to ask Jeff, I know we had spoken a little bit at Camp Now. I guess, what are some of the challenges that you see in the industry just over the next few years? I guess, what are some of the things that campground owners really need to focus on?
Well, I think the main thing is going to be capacity. Processing reservations as efficiently as possible. Figuring out what the windows are for reservations. Because some campgrounds are really helpful. And one of the things that I talk about at different conferences is, and I'll use this opportunity to talk about it. Many campgrounds still need to change who they have working at the front desk. There's times when I call campgrounds and it's the person answering the phone sounds like they just got out of jail. I mean, they're paranoid, they're useless in terms of information, and they can't provide any guidance to anyone calling. And I hate it when I encounter those people, because they're the ones who undermine all of the marketing dollars that park spends trying to market itself to consumers. And yet they blow it by having somebody without phone skills working the phone. And the reason I'm talking about this is that we are in a period of time when there is so much demand for campsites that the people working the phones need to know what to tell people who are frustrated that they can't get reservations, and be able to give them really good practical advice. I talked recently with a park owner in New York, and I asked her a question, what do you tell people? What strategies should people use? Because we've spent the past few years telling everybody they need to make reservations online. She said, go back to the old-fashioned way. Call the front desk. Talk to whoever is at the front desk and get their advice on when to book a campsite and when there might be availability. Midweek availability is still there. Not as much as it used to be, but it's still there in many locations, especially if you want to rent a cabin, a park model somewhere. In many cases, midweek's the only thing you're going to get, because the weekends book up months in advance. But I think that parks generally need to be focusing on their customer service and how they're going to help people navigate reservations these next few years. And then at the same time, they need to continue to make investments in improvement and expansions, because these new people coming into the market have high expectations. So the bar is continuing to be raised. And this isn't a market where, you can get by just doing the minimum. You have to do the maximum, as we've seen with Wi-Fi and some of the other amenities. Things have to work. People don't have much tolerance for things that don't work.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of a two-way street too, because the campground owners can't hire staff. Their hiring practices are kind of by the wayside, because if you're breathing and you're not in jail, you're eligible for the job. It's really become that level of hiring out there. And so you've got what Jeff just described, but you've also got a brand new crop of campers that have probably never ever been on a campground before, or have very limited experience, and just don't know the etiquette, don't know how to behave, don't know that they shouldn't be walking through through the middle of somebody else's site, or controlling their kids, or turning the music down. All those etiquette things that make camping pleasurable those take time, and it's an education process. And when you dump this many new faces into the parks at one time, it becomes a real challenge for a limited staff, which is probably inexperienced too. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a rough summer for that experience.
Mike, you and I have talked about this. If you're a campground owner and your campsites are now full 7 days a week, when do you cut the grass?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When do you clean the bathrooms?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then you're talking with park owners who normally have, 5, 10 people, maybe even more. And, when I talk to them at conferences, they, maybe it's just 2 to 3 extra people, or maybe it's not. Some of them don't have any extra people at all. It's just the owners scrambling around all summer. So hopefully a lot of park owners were able to work on that. I know last year was pretty hairy for some of them, but hopefully they were able to work on it this off season. But I mean, back to your point, Jeff, with the dynamic pricing too, when it comes to like phone skills and talking with customers, they've really had to start adjusting how they talk to customers, because now, your site doesn't have one price. You have to say, well, it depends on the date. It depends on when you want the site, things like that. So, there's all these new things that they have to learn as well, on top of all the old things. So I'm glad I'm not a park owner and I don't have to train employees. So But well, before we go, somebody did ask Carl Jones. I'm seeing more and more large acre properties being sold to RVers in multi-site tracts. Do you see that? So I guess, is he talking about like properties that sell RV sites? Like,
He might be talking about what Mike and Jennifer Wendland are currently doing. They just bought several acres in Tennessee. They've got their eye on something similar up north in Michigan, and also down in Florida. And it's basically, for lack of a better way to describe it, it's basically a co-op where it's a large development and you buy into it and it's your land and you develop it like it's a campsite. But I think in the Mike and Jennifer's case, the one in Tennessee, I think they said 5 acres or something like that. It's just another way that the industry is going to evolve. Yeah, there'll be some people interested in that. I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, I wonder what the regulations and stuff are on that kind of stuff. I know, yeah, that's kind of interesting. I haven't really heard of that too much, but maybe a little bit. But that's kind of interesting. I guess before we go to, Joe Moore just said, a positive outlook on all of this. These are great problems to have. Our industry is in a very robust position for the next several years. In current future RVers and campers will be the beneficiary of some very good parks with a wider range of choices, which is very true. The industry's done really well compared to some other industries. And I mean, it is a great time to work in the outdoor hospitality industry. And hopefully things continue to go well. And park owners can solve the employee issue so they can get the help they need. So, but I think it's about time to leave. But you guys have all made me feel really young. So that's mainly why I invited all of you guys on.
Well, I'd be a big fan for doing this once a month because we're all so knowledgeable and Ben tries to keep up and it's kind of fun.
Right. We can make them sweat a little bit.
But just for some of the people who don't know, WoodallCM.com operates a website and we have a magazine. I'll put the website address up. Everything we do is free for park owners and suppliers, and we have a monthly print magazine that we publish for across North America. And Jeff Crider often writes quite a few stories for that. So thank you, Jeff. And it's just it's been great to be at work in the outdoor hospitality industry. Next week, Mike and I are taking a week off. I got jury duty, which Rick, I hadn't told you. I have jury next Tuesday. And Mike's son is coming to Hawaii. So
yeah, I'm almost operating a bed and breakfast out here now. So get your applications in soon.
So we're going to take the week off, but the following week we're going to be back. We're going to be talking with an owner who operates a contactless park. So basically it's all automated. So it should be a lot of fun. Thanks for watching, and we hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
Very good.
Thanks, everybody.
Talk to you guys later.
Bye.